Throughout the course of the project, there may be times you may want to review your ductwork system without the formality of creating a report and then cross-referencing that data to the Revit model. So Revit has a tool called System Inspector to help with checking the duct system without having to develop a report. So with Revit open, zoom into the lower right-hand corner of the plan and select the terminal box. And with the terminal box selected, on the active ribbon under the Modify Mechanical Equipment tab, you're going to select the System Inspector button that's on the Analyze panel. Now selecting this button will open the System Inspector panel and screen everything back on your view but the system you're inspecting. Special note, the System Inspector panel may be in the ribbon. I currently have my panel undocked from the ribbon. Once you select the Inspect button on the System Inspector panel, Revit generates airflows on the duct system indicating airflow direction. And as you hover over various parts of the system, a flyout tag will pop up. And within this flyout tab has multiple data about the system. To start with, it shows the section number. This number is the same number that Revit assigns to the ductwork in the duct pressure loss report. The flyout also shows the CFM at that section, static pressure, the pressure loss, the total pressure, and excess pressure. Along with the flow arrows, Revit color codes the flow arrows to serve as a quick reference to indicate where the duct design does not meet the design criteria set within the model. And to end the inspection command, select the Finish or Cancel button on the System Inspector panel. Another way to visually represent duct design data is by using system color schemes. Now this parameter is under the Graphics section on the Properties palette. And when you select the Edit button next to the System Color Scheme parameter, the Color Schemes dialog box will appear with a list of Revit categories that are allowed to be edited. Since we're working with ductwork, select the button next to Ducts to launch the Edit Color Scheme dialog box. This dialog box has two main sections in it. You have Schemes on the left and Scheme Definitions on the right. Starting on the left under Schemes, Revit provides the None default, but you can create as many schemes as you'd like. Currently, there's the airflow and air velocity schemes. So let's select the airflow scheme, and we'll notice that the scheme definition now becomes populated. And moving over to the scheme definition portion of the dialog box, there are four main items. You have title, color, a by range or by value decision, and an edit format button. The edit format button addresses how the parameter you set the color scheme to will appear in the legend. While the by range or by value is an either or decision, and this decision affects the values you place in the chart in the dialog box. And the color option relates to the parameter that is selected to be represented by the color scheme. For the airflow color scheme, the color is set to flow. So now select the OK button and then the OK button again, and Revit will apply the selected color schemes to the active view. Now these colors by themselves on the view do not mean much. So on the Analyze tab on the Color Fill panel, select the Duct Legend button and Revit will create a color legend to match the color scheme on the view. As you'll notice, the title of the legend is Scheme 1 Legend instead of Airflow. And this is because the color legend gets the data for the title from the title value under the scheme definition and not the scheme name. So if you need to edit this title, select the Edit button on the Properties palette next to the System Color Schemes parameter, and then the button next to the duct value in the Color Scheme dialog box to get to the Edit Color Scheme dialog box. And in here, you can rename the title if you would like to. But instead of renaming the title for Airflow, let's go ahead and change the scheme to Air Velocity and OK out of the dialog boxes. And with that change, Revit changes the color of the ductwork and the legend to match the new scheme. Simply put, the colors in the view are only visual representations of what's actually being determined in the Edit Color Scheme dialog box. The actual control of what you want to see is done in the dialog box, not actually in the view. So keep that in mind as you're working through this. So going back into the Edit Color Scheme dialog box, let's change the Air Velocity scheme back to Airflow scheme and see what happens if we change the range values. So if we change the at least value from 1000 CFM to 700 CFM and apply that edit, the less than value of the line above changed to match the 700 CFM value. Now if we attempt to change the new 700 CFM value to 1600 CFM, Revit will give you a message stating that the value must be below 1500 CFM. Revit gives you this message because the at least value cannot be greater than the less than value on a given range. So to correct this, just change the 1600 CFM value back to a value below 1500 CFM. In this case, change it to 700 CFM so that the range will work properly. And with these edits, select the OK button and OK out of the color scheme dialog box, and the airflow color scheme with the new CFM ranges are now applied to your active view. One thing to note about applying color schemes to views: you can only have one color scheme applied to a view at a time. So if you're in a situation where you want to have multiple color schemes to compare, you're going to have to create a view for each color scheme you want to work with.